there's two ways to do life. You can suffer or not.
It's a simple choice.
And most of the suffering is based on our attachments to our ideas and what we think is supposed to be happening or not, right? And so we each have that power within us to change our perspective and to also choose to do good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Oto Gomes Crypto Show. I'm your host, Oto Gomes, and today we have a very special guest, Luke Storey. I have followed him for many years, and he has changed my perspective on many, many, many things. Luke Storey is a motivational speaker, meditation and metaphysics teacher, and lifestyle design expert who shares transformative principles of health and spirituality. With over 400 plus episodes, he is the host of the top-rated The Lifestylist podcast and founder of School of Style, the world's premier online fashion school for stylists. Luke spent the past 2 decades refining the ultimate wellness lifestyle. His teachings combine primal health and ancient spiritual practices with the most cutting-edge natural healing and consciousness-expanding technologies. He has been featured in The Hollywood Reporter, Los Angeles Magazine, Men's Fitness, and has appeared on numerous TV networks, including Style Network, VH1, and MTV. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Luke Storey. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. My name is Oto Gomes, and I am super excited today to connect with my brother, Luke. Luke Storey, you are the ultimate biohacker and becoming the best version of yourself person. I've heard so many stories about you from so many people, and I'm super excited to connect with you. And I'm just super grateful for you taking the time and effort to connect with me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. I love talking about all the ways in which someone can improve their life, especially right now with so many people kind of under the hammer of the human experience.
The human experience. I love saying that phrase because it breaks everything down to like, it's all good. This is the experience. So thank you for saying that. This last year has been just an interesting, these last 2 years now, I guess you can say, 2020, 2021 has shaken up this reality in so many ways. And you either, in my perspective, you either fell deeper into the fear or you were able to kind of snap out of the fear and go, whoa, I need to take control of my life. I need to take my power back. So I love doing these interviews to get to know the person that I'm speaking to and just their journey towards this point, towards this pivotal point in this reality with the conscious collective. So what was your journey into this point? What was your red pill moment that shifted you in your life towards this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think any of us that are on the path have definitely had those catalytic pivotal points where it's not even that your life changes. It's more like your perspective changes, usually, in my case at least, because of outside circumstances facilitating that change in perspective. I think for me, the big shift was when I was 26. I'm 51 now, and I had lived my adolescence, teen years, and the first half of my 20s in just in the throes of addiction and alcoholism. And I always talk about it like it was this really dark time, but there were periods in which it was really fun. I was playing in a band. I lived in Hollywood. I moved there when I was 19 and had a lot of fun. There was a phase, quote, end quotes, where I was partying. And then there was, toward the end, just a period of darkness and a lot of self-inflicted demoralization. And so when I was 26, I had hit the ultimate subterranean rock bottom and checked myself into rehab. And I know that was really such a huge turning point in my life, because up until then I was just plagued by negative thought patterns and self-destructive behavior and selfishness, and was just living at such a kind of animalistic base level of survival. It was just survival and just finding ways to mask childhood trauma. And then later on, that sort of self-imposed trauma of all of the shame of being an addict. When you're a drug addict, you can fool yourself and delude yourself, and you can use that powerful tool of denial to trick oneself into thinking that you're okay. It's the rest of these people that are the problem, which is kind of the mindset of most addicts. It's like, if everyone would just leave me alone, I'd be fine. I'm a good person.
I'm not hurting anyone.
Yeah. But then, and I would now, of course, realize I did hurt a lot of people, unfortunately, but most of all myself. So that was a huge turning point for me, because I began to question my entire existence and what my life was about and the purpose of my life. And the perspective that I had on the human experience was so dark and so negative, and I was just so plagued by just hateful thoughts and fearful thoughts. And somewhere within the core of my being, there was love, and there was care for other people and care for myself. And I think that was really the first time that I started to access that. Having checked into a treatment center and had a sense of, even though it was terrifying and it was extremely painful experience to now take away all the anesthesia that I was using, there was a sense of pride and a sense of hope that began to develop, because, man, here I have 24 hours clean, and then I have 48 hours and so on, right? Next thing you know, it's like I'm walking out of this place 26 years old, and I have, I guess, 28, 29 days under my belt, right? And then that really facilitated the journey that I'm still on today of trying to understand what had happened for me. There was a gift of grace that was bestowed upon me, just due to the fact that I was really able to humble myself, and I had such a depth of surrender that all of these miraculous events started to take place in my life, and this transformation unfolded. And so that was, it's been almost 25 years since that happened. And I think that's when my whole worldview began to change. Later on, I would immerse myself into all types of different meditation, and, going to India to seek gurus that I might be able to, sit at the feet of, and working on my health and detoxing and getting into what's now called biohacking. It used to just be called, I don't know what it was called. You were just a health nut. I think I became a health nut, and I was trying to reverse all of the damage I had done to myself metaphysically and physically. And so that has been a long period. But I think in terms of, like the red pill and the way that we think about it today, socially and politically, when 9/11 happened, I remember, of course, like most people, someone called me into the room, said, "Oh my God, turn on the TV. A plane hit the Pentagon and the World Trade Centers, and oh my God, it's a terrorist attack." And like everyone else, I just believed what the TV told me to believe about that. And it was a great tragedy, and also a really sort of confusing time, because so many of the ways in which we hold our safety and security in this country were kind of undergoing this upheaval. But shortly after that, a friend of mine invited me over, and he had this new thing on his computer called YouTube. And he said, "Man, you remember, what happened with 9/11? It was a few months later, maybe a year later or something." I was like, "Yeah, it was crazy." He goes, "Yeah, I remember when that plane hit the Pentagon." And I was like, "Yeah, that was gnarly. There was a big explosion and fire and everything." He goes, "Yeah, but did you see a plane?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course, everyone saw the plane. It was on the news. Like, hello, where have you been?" And he goes, "Watch this." And he showed me like this 8 to 12 minute video, wherein it became very obvious to anyone with two eyes in their head that there was no plane present at the Pentagon. And to this day, no one's been able to produce any credible evidence to the fact that there was, in fact, a plane that hit that building. And so thus began not only a questioning of, my relationship with the world, but especially my relationship with media, and beginning to see through the veil. And then that opened up so many other inquiries within me. Not only, as I said about myself, because that inquiry was going on, just how do I view the world? How do I interact with people? Am I making a contribution, or am I a detriment to my fellows? And that was ongoing. But then my vision started to peer outward, and I started to realize that so many things that I took for granted, in terms of what we're being told and how the world is portrayed to us through media, began to really crumble. And it's been a really exciting time since then, and it's always, especially in what we've been going through over the past couple of years, there's a razor's edge of wanting to know the truth about the nature of the universe and the nature of the world as we see it and the human experience at large. But once you start to uncover some of the falsehood that's been perpetrated upon us, it can also get kind of dark and fearful and depressing. So that's where, for me, all of the metaphysical and spiritual work and all of the kind of shifts in mindset have really come into play, so that I can participate in the world and hopefully contribute something positive, which is debatable, but most of the time I think I'm able to do that. And also, be a truth seeker, but also not live in fear, and just understand that the duality of good and evil and dark and light and all of the things that we live in every day have a purpose, and that it is possible for there to be a loving, intelligent design universally that our Creator has manifested for us to have this experience, and also for there to be the existence of true core evil. And so being in relationship with that duality and understanding that I have a choice in every thought that I have, literally every thought, I have a choice in which thoughts I want to give energy to. So now I find myself kind of navigating, having a deeper understanding of the way things are in the world, and having an awareness and keeping an open mind to all sides of opinion, and also just knowing that no matter what's going on in the outer world, my number one job is my inner world, and to really be mindful of the types of thoughts and emotions that I'm going to entertain and then express as a result. So to put a bow on that, I think my core mission has always been in discovering the truth, right? Just the objective truth of things. And when I find what I believe to be true, I'm compelled to share that information with people who have elected to listen. And, thus began my foray into independent media and podcasting and public speaking and writing a book and all of the things that I'm doing now. It's sort of like when I've found ways to alleviate my own suffering, I just have to share that, right? If you figured out how to heal a bone faster or get over a cold or something more superficial, and you meet someone who says, oh man, I'm on crutches, I can't heal my leg. And I go, I had that too, and it really sucked. And I found a way out that's probably faster and more effective. And that's, sort of a trivial example of that. But when it comes to just the inherent existential suffering of humanity, as someone who's subjectively figured out a way to live in this world that's pretty crazy and at times very dark, but just be happy no matter what. I love to share that, and to give other people the tools that I've found from teachers that I've studied under or researched, and say, man, there's two ways to do life. You can suffer or not.
It's a simple choice.
And most of the suffering is based on our attachments to our ideas and what we think is supposed to be happening or not, right? And so we each have that power within us to change our perspective, and to also choose to do good in the world, right? I can see this game of duality and say, well, if none of this matters and there's no way that any of us can defeat evil because the universe is just made of these polar opposites, there's polarity and there's contrast. So, I'm just going to sit on the couch, watch TV and drink beer and just, eat Doritos until I die. I'm not compelled to do that. I still want to make a positive contribution, because it seems that the game that we've been gifted with here is rife with opportunities for the elevation of consciousness. I don't have to worry about elevating other people's consciousness. That's their business, but I can work on mine. And as I'm successful and not in so doing, then I can, share that with people. So that's really what my mission is about. It's as the sea level rises, all boats are lifted.
Wow. First off, amazing, articulate, just so grounded response about your journey and how you got here. And I love that you mentioned the duality, because even I've seen people that have been in, pursuit of the truth of the universal truths for decades. Because of what happened these last few years, they've leaned into one side of the spectrum. And it's like, this is what it is. Everybody else can screw it. Like get out of my hologram. And I love that you're still, even after 20 plus years, you're still trying to bridge that gap. You're still trying to find that middle ground and be open to any perspective, because we're students for life. We're still absorbing information and processing. And I also love that you said those that are willing to listen, right? Those that are willing to be receptive of the information, because you can share. It doesn't mean that the person's going to be receptive, and also how you share, right? It can be a desperate energy, or it can be this love-based sharing energy, which is in your control. But at the end of the day, yes, you got to just do it. But I love that. That was an amazing perspective.
Thank you. Well, that's the difference between sharing and proselytizing, right? It's
proselytizing, like,
yes. I think if one isn't really sure about who they are and what they believe to be true, there's a higher degree of desire to control other people's perception and get them to align with what you believe to be true, right? And that's that sort of self-righteous preaching perspective that actually has the opposite effect of getting people on board with your message.
100%.
So to me,
it's repelling. It's like a repelling energy almost, that when you come at someone with that kind of way. Yeah.
It is. And it's also, I think what we experience now culturally with so much division and polarization, you have kind of one sect of people that, from my perspective, and I could be wrong, but what I believe to be true and observe is that many people at this point are deeply entrenched in a cognitive dissonance, in that it's hard for some people to imagine that there are truly depraved, evil people controlling the planet, controlling culture, like controlling all of the institutions of our life. And not that all of those people are evil and depraved, but that there is an agenda that is not in service of the betterment of humanity. And it's really hard to accept that, especially if you are a compassionate, kind, benevolent person. And I think that's perhaps at the core of this cultural and political sort of inversion that we see, where people that are leaning more liberal are actually more in favor of authoritarianism, and people that would have classically been considered more conservative are actually fundamentally more liberal in the truest definition of that, in that live and let live, just leave me alone to live my life, kind of a libertarian sort of point of view. And so it's been really interesting to observe within some spiritual circles that the other side, and I don't try to take sides, I'm just on my side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
I'm over here in a little island, and I'm just like, oh, look, that's interesting. That's interesting.
I'm just trying to live my life. But let's just say, in terms of the division between people who have elected to participate in experimental gene therapy and the people that don't want to participate in that experiment. It seems that the people that don't want to participate in the experiment, by and large, I mean, it's case by case, but just by and large, the sentiment seems to be like, hey, do whatever you want. I'm just over here doing this, right? And don't impose your views on me. and my family. But the other side that's sort of pro, I think, has a desire to bring more people onto their side, perhaps in part because of that cognitive dissonance, because at one's core, they're going along with kind of the state and party narrative, but somewhere inside they kind of know that this doesn't really add up. And if you are going along with a narrative that you don't fully believe in, one way to make it more comfortable to do so is to onboard as many people as you can with your opinion, because underneath there's a foundation within you that is somewhat feeble. There's a doubt. There's a seed of doubt within you that like, I'm going to go along with this because I want to be a good person. It seems like the right thing to do. And frankly, I'm afraid. But from my perspective, and I am always willing to understand that I'm sure I'm wrong about a lot of things, but I don't have any doubts about my position. So I don't have any desire to bring anyone else over to my side, right? I'm not campaigning for people to not participate in the medical experiment right now. Like, do whatever you want. I'm happy for you that you're making decisions for yourself as an adult, right? But I don't need anyone else to confirm my bias for me to feel comfortable. I believe I know what I know. I think what I think. I feel what I feel. And I'm open to changing that. But when I've settled on a position, which I very much have at this point, I can just leave people alone. And that's a really interesting social phenomenon, of the shaming and vitriol and hatred from one group of people that believes one thing against the others to try to get them onto their side. It's just, I don't know what that means, but it's just interesting to observe kind of the need of one perspective to control the perspective of the other side. And really fight for that, and to vilify the people that don't share their perspective or don't share their willingness and enthusiasm to be part of an experiment, or to even take at face value that the circumstances we find ourselves in are such as we're being told.
Yeah, 100%. I love, my favorite comment is, "You're wrong." Okay. It's like, if you're limiting yourself to your own limitations, and I guess it's, you only know what you know, right? But if you're limiting yourself to your own limitations and you can't take in other people's perspective, it's like, the energy to go into that conversation, like for me now, is just like, here it is. I have no want to try to prove anything to you. Here it is. But yeah, you mentioned some interesting things here that kind of stirred up a few questions. This last year, really, to go back to what your journey, for you became very aware of the distortion and manipulation of the media very early on. I mean, you mentioned it was a year after 9/11 happened that you saw that video on YouTube.
Yeah.
So for this last 2 years, how did it become, when did it become obvious that like, whoa, now they're doing this manipulation on a mass scale? Holy crap. 'Cause to me, as soon as they announced COVID and it started rolling out, I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. So how is it for you? When did it become like personal enough that you were like, oh, this is different. This is very different.
Well, it's interesting, when I first began to be exposed to alternative media around the time of 9/11, I started reading books and watching videos and going to lectures by people that were able to foresee the events that we're seeing now ahead of time. And I remember even like people like David Icke, for example. And even back then, I thought, a lot of this makes sense, but transhumanism, genocide, all of the scary kind of end game of the powers that be, like they really want to destroy humanity and enslave you. I think at that time, I thought, that's a little too far. Like you kind of have to take some of it with a grain of salt. Now there were points made by some of these people that I guess now would be blanketed as conspiracy theorists, but I look at the mainstream media more as conspiracy theorists personally.
Yes, especially now.
Going back to, the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And I mean, there's so many huge touch points at which they've really, perpetuated massive falsehoods that have culminated in mass suffering and death, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not to say everyone in media is bad. I got an email from someone a couple of days ago about my critique of CNN, and I had made some, which is probably a really stupid comment to make I was totally joking, but I said, I wish somebody would just blow up the CNN building, but when no one's in there, and obviously I don't mean that, but I realized it was a good point. I should be careful what I say. Someone might not know that I'm joking. I think what I meant to say metaphorically was just...
The critical thinkers are like, oh, we get it.
Yeah, I mean, metaphorically,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to, not even the demise of the establishment media, but just something different being built that is
right,
more integrous, that takes its place. But anyway, back to the point. So a lot of the people that I started following had perspectives based on historical fact that were irrefutable. So you look at the royal family bloodlines, you look at these, the CFR and all of these different sort of alphabet organizations that were rife with corruption and the secret societies that evolved out of these bloodlines and then sort of formed these conglomerate groups that were in the shadows, now what we might call elements of the deep state, and that they're really the ones pulling the strings and making the decisions, and that the illusion of democracy and the fact that, or the idea that we vote for our leaders and choose them was all kind of illusory.
Right.
And so a lot of that was like, well, cool. I mean, this person's backing up what they say with historical facts and there are relevant points being made. But as far as like why they're doing it and where this is all going, it was a little too far. So when this started to unfold, to me, it was like, oh, this is the thing these guys were talking about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're doing it. Like this has been the agenda. And that's not to say that, again, every theory that someone has espoused is legitimate, right? I mean, the whole QAnon thing is a great example of that, right? It's like, oh, okay, Kennedy Jr. didn't die in the crash. He's playing Trump. I don't know. I couldn't even keep track of it. It's just like
there's a lot. I was following along with that for a while, and I did a lot of the research myself, and it's like, whoa, there's a lot of. I mean, they went out in so many different web directions. So yeah,
it's definitely some sort of a psyop, and so I think over time one just begins to exercise and practice and embody discernment. And so for me, I sort of like to live in the not knowing, right? It's like I might be presented with information that just feels off to me. And that was the case with this, that you see all of these people just falling flat on their face in Wuhan and just collapsing in the street. And when I started to see that, I was like, that looks fake. I mean, I would watch a video and go, that shit's not real. Mm-hmm. But I also don't know necessarily what is real, right? And I think living in that mystery is healthy. And then when facts present themselves that are integrous and verifiable, then maybe you cling to those loosely, and that helps guide your perspective or opinions. But I really enjoy just being malleable and open to letting go of old ideas, which I thought to be true and have proven themselves to be false, and also that being open to new ideas. And even broadly speaking, I mean, in going back to that duality, if you look at something like 9/11 and all of those innocent people, 4,000 people or whatever it was dying, and the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East that died as a result of all that, I don't have enough information to know if what happened ultimately, in the long run, after I'm far dead and gone in this version of myself, that wasn't part of kind of a master plan, right? And that it was all part of humankind's evolution. That's not to say, oh, I think it's great that those people died. Obviously not. But if you truly open your mind in the most broad sense, ultimately you arrive at, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, so with the thing we're going through now, from one limited fear-based self-protective point of view, this is the most diabolical, evil thing ever, and it needs to be stopped, right? But I can't see into the future 50, 100, 500 years from now and see that this point in history is where kind of the other side of the scale of duality expressed itself so in such a pronounced way that it actually brought about the awakening and an up-leveling of consciousness for humankind as a whole, and that this was just a catalyst, and unfortunately a catalyst in which a lot of people are suffering and will continue to suffer for various reasons. But I don't really know that this isn't the way things are supposed to be going. I don't know that.
I had a very, very similar conversation with a friend, and he said something beautiful. He said, "This is it. This is the expression of the duality." And so he even called it like, "This is natural." And I was like, "Whoa, don't call it natural." But he's like, "But it is." you have the, he said, there's good in everything. You're going to get the good, you're going to get the bad in everything. It's going to be that duality in every situation. And so you have to, shift your own perspective of the situation and how you look at it. And that will determine, how you live, if you have a healthy lifestyle or not. But yeah, it's the whole mess, in my opinion, is great. I love it. I love that it's shaking things up. I love that it's, a lot of people are calling it Judgment Day, that it's the apocalypse, that it's the end of the world. And I'm trying to layer that out in my head. I grew up Christian, Pentecostal Christian, so I have my own perspectives of what was taught to me, and then now what I'm experiencing and what I'm discerning myself. And it's like, whoa, is it natural? Is this actually what is supposed to happen?
Well, in my experience, especially in the last 3 years or so, and it's interesting that the timing of this exploration coincided with, I think, probably the biggest event in human history, in recorded history, just something that's taken place that has affected more people in a more profound way than ever before. And it's difficult for us to even see because we're in the middle of it and we're just like, oh man, my job wants me to do this thing and I really love my job. We're kind of caught up in the day-to-day navigation of it individually. But for me, something that's really expanded my awareness has been the intentional use of psychedelics and plant medicines. And in the depth of some of those experiences, and of course, it's always difficult to come out of that experience and then contextualize what you discovered during a ceremony into day-to-day life. That's the integration, right? It's like, okay, I saw things in a completely different light. How can I keep some of that, but still come back to being a normal person and living my life? Because I'm not in a body having this experience because there was no intention for me to do so, right? So obviously, whatever and whoever created me as this single point of consciousness they call Luke Storey put me in a body because I'm supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be floating off in the ethers. Otherwise, I would be a celestial being or some other form of my soul, which we don't quite know until we're there, right? But in those extremely powerful and transformative experiences, thinking of something like 5-MeO-DMT, which is, for me, just kind of the mothership of, it's not even a psychedelic. It's like, it's ineffable, actually. It's such a profound experience that words to describe it are incredibly feeble. It's just, you just can't, it just doesn't work. I try, I explain, what has happened.
Is it like a higher version of ayahuasca or like something that's more in depth than ayahuasca? Because I know
Yeah.
I did ayahuasca myself, and it was like this internal journey of this self-discovery, like knowing the shadows and looking at them in the eye. So
Yeah.
how is this different?
Well, and what I'm speaking of for those listening that are unaware, 5-MeO-DMT is a constituent of a particular toad's venom that can be smoked. It's the Bufo alvarius toad.
Bufo. Okay, I know it by Bufo.
Yeah. And there's also a synthetic version of that molecule.
Gotcha.
I've not done the synthetic version, but to get to the point of like what has transpired as a result of that, and how it compares to something like ayahuasca, it's in the peak of a 5-MeO experience, at least for me, is everyone has their own unique experience, but there's a complete dissolution of the observer witness self. So in mushrooms or LSD or ayahuasca, there's a connection to realms, dimensions, interdimensional sort of awareness and travel, and perhaps, and for some people, the visitation of entities, or just an awareness or a perceptual openness that there are these other dimensions and interdimensional beings, and in fact, God itself. In Bufo, at the height of the experience, there's no longer a you as a participant in the experience, because your consciousness merges into the totality of all that is, which for some is terrifying. Well, it's not terrifying. Yeah. It's not terrifying to you. It's terrifying to the ego that's often resisting and grasping at control of its own existence in an effort to make sure that you still exist, because that's the ego's job, is to really keep the body alive ultimately. But anyway, as it pertains to the rest of this conversation, in the 6 experiences that I've had with that particular medicine, they've all had their own unique flavor, but all of them have had that thread, which is, at least for moments, there's no longer a you there, and you're experiencing reality so universally that duality is completely erased. And as your witness, observer, soul, person, mind, intellect, ego starts to kind of reemerge as the substance subsides, it's like you start to piece back together reality from the perspective of being a person. But in that liftoff experience and the transition back into your body, back to what you perceive to be wholeness and integrity within your being, there's a depth of understanding that makes peace with duality, and that there's a perfection and a precision in the way our reality presents itself and manifests in the material form, because you're removed from all material form and all separation of there being a this and a that, a dark and a light, a me and a them. Since all of that's gone, when it comes back, you really see, oh, there's the polarity, there's the contrast. And
I see what you're saying. So you before you do it, you are in one side of the spectrum or another, or wherever you are.
Yeah.
And you don't see the spectrum, but after doing it, you kind of are able to step back and see the spectrum of everything.
Yeah, because in our normal waking state, except perhaps in a transcendent experience or a deep meditation or something, in which you kind of fold into the quantum realm, and there's no longer a here and a there and a now and a then, right? There are points at which you're just you're just in the stillness of everythingness. But in that medicine experience, it's pronounced in an infinitely more powerful way. And so for me, it's been, and it's hard to say this without sounding grandiose, but there really is no way to say it. It's like experiencing reality as God experiences reality, and seeing that in order for God to experience itself it has to create another. Because if everything is one, there's no differentiation.
Well, it just blew my mind, but that was well said. Yes.
So
Yeah. Wow.
when one sort of returns to this state and looks at the news, there's a much more readily accessible point of view that all of the duality is ultimately still that one thing. And that the perception that we have of here, there, me, you, them, those, up, down, black, white, good, evil, is all ultimately part of the same fabric of God. And it's like consciousness, in order for it to, God or consciousness, in order for it to experience itself, has to manifest in all of these multitudes of ways. And so there's kind of an underlying, not just understanding, but compassion for, and a gratitude for that gift. For me to be able to be, for a temporary period of time, a them, an it, a person, separate from you and separate from the world, the environment, other people, right? To have a unique perspective of consciousness where I've been temporarily singled out and taken out of that larger fabric of consciousness and reality so that I can look at it and I can look at other things from a unique single point of awareness. But when one has, and I'm going to say this, I'm not a believer that everyone should try psychedelics or do bufo. Like it's your own thing. Like don't say, oh, Luke said it's doing this, so I'm going to do it. Like do your own research, do your thing, right? But I can't not talk about my experience because it's shaped every iota of my life. But in re-emerging and sort of piecing back together this single point of perspective that I have, there's just a lightness in being that remains prevalent. And there's also, I would say, a more keen awareness as to moments when I'm moving back into density and a lower state of consciousness. In other words, like when I start believing the illusion of the material world too much, I start to feel it like, ooh, I'm getting too invested in this. Even though I accept that this is part of what we're meant to do here because, hey, I'm still in a body. If I wasn't in a body, who knows what would be happening, but I'm in a body. So it's one of the requirements of being in a body and in your nervous system and using the body and your emotions and your thoughts and all of your senses as a means by which to experience the material world. It's obvious that we're supposed to be doing that. But there's also much more beyond the material world, and we're given the opportunity to experience that at the same time as being firmly grounded in this reality. And so it's like wearing the world like a loose garment. There's a certain
knowing that you're wearing a garment. Yeah.
No, yeah, like I'm in some respects right now in my life, there is so much stress. There is so much going on. Sometimes I wonder just how my brain is not exploding. It's just like every day. It's a lot. It's just, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of expansion, a lot of growth in the earthly realm, in the material realm. Bought a house, renovating, different companies, trying to sell this company, starting this other, just doing the things, a relationship, right? Getting married, just all that. And it's all just much less serious as a result of having those powerfully transcendent experiences. And so I think that's the thing that is so important about exploring those realms, is understanding that when you're going interdimensional like that, it's tempting to build an attachment to those realms, right? Because you're not encumbered by your body and the physical experience, and all of your problems just melt away, and you're in these altered states of consciousness. But to me, the purpose of those altered states of consciousness is to come back here and just keep a toe in the water over there. That's like, oh yeah, I'm going to play along with the role of being a person because that's what I'm supposed to do. But I also know that this is just such a minute sliver of the greater expanse of reality, that beyond the perception that I'm given from being in a body, there's an infinite number of dimensions and realms that are also coexisting with the realm that I believe to be so true and solid here. And I think that that's the way out of the rigidity and the limitations of scientism and politics and social constructs and this addiction to changing the outside world to meet my belief systems and and to overcome that cognitive dissonance I was talking about before. It really is like the world is exactly as it's supposed to be, and it's my job to navigate through this world in as much alignment to love as possible. Like that's the job. That's the job. Is this love or not? If it's not love, I don't punish myself. I do my best to veer myself back toward love. And that's not love like a romantic love, like, oh, I love you, man. I love you, baby. It's an acknowledgement of the energy field of love toward the entire universal human and beyond human experience. It's like an actual love of reality, the reality that I've been presented with. It's like, how can I be in that energy field of love even deeper and even greater? And then if I'm given the opportunity to outwardly effect change, it's coming from pure inspiration and pure intuition, not out of an egoic desire to be right or to control other people's viewpoint or perception or behavior. There's no control necessary in love because love is the ultimate liberation from all control. So coming back into form and being in this world and playing in the duality becomes actually really interesting. It's really interesting. It
becomes fun. Yeah, it's like a metaphysical playground.
Yeah, and that's not to say, man. I mean, I started a Telegram channel as just a dumping ground where I can put information I find in the world that is not allowed on other platforms, and I can go in there and go down rabbit holes just like the next person. Be like, oh my God, we're doomed. So it's not like what I'm describing is not something that I have mastered, but I taste it here and there, and from practicing it, I get better at it, right? Of just having a more detached relationship with day-to-day life.
Man,
it just makes everything a lot lighter. I think that's the thing. I mean, if I wrote down all of the things going on in my life that require my attention and awareness and work and all the things, I mean, like I said, it would be so overwhelming, but it's almost like, I don't know how, it's so hard to describe. It's almost as if someone else is doing it through me. I'm just sometimes feel like an automaton, right? And I'm just like, now I'm going to do this podcast. And then I watch the body get in the car and it has to go over here to Home Depot. And then it has to do this and that. And I'm just kind of along for the ride and living life in that way with a less sticky grip and attachment on outcomes and all of the details of it just makes it all just so much more fun and also just entertaining and surprising. It's like living really in the moment and just doing what the next indicated step is, rather than future tripping about if and when. Because the if and when right now, if you turn on your TV or even if you turn on alternative media, is like, oh yeah, we are doomed. We're fucked, But right now,
they're calling it the black pill. You take the black pill, it's like, oh, we're doomed. We're done.
Yeah, but in reality, in each passing moment that we experience is the now. There really is no now because it's just a punctuation point in an eternal now, right? It's just an internal, all-time, everywhere, everything, every oneness, right? Just the expansive consciousness. And we perceive like this moment as a now, but where'd it go? Oh, it's gone. That now is gone. So was it a now? No. But as you could say, just present moment, laser focus awareness of just being where my body is and keeping my thoughts and my emotions and every sense that I have in this moment actually feels very safe, because it is. It is safe. The only time I feel threatened is when I leave that present moment awareness.
Right.
And so one would say, well, if you're just living in this present moment awareness, how do you prepare for the future and ensure that you continue to be safe? Well, that future that I'm preparing for is a falsehood. It literally does not exist in the time continuum. The only thing that is remotely real is consciousness expressing itself in this exact moment. And then that moment's gone, and it's gone, and it's gone, and it's gone. So you'll never be more safe than you are right now, then right now, then right now, then right now, even to the point of death. I would imagine you're always okay.
I love that, because I love my dad, but he lives in the past and in the future. He doesn't live in the moment. And you know, something, I heard this from someone else, but what I've heard was that if you live in the past, you're always going to be living in regret, living in the fear of repeating it, right? Fear of repeating the past. So you live in that space going, I can't do that again. And then so you're living your life, I can't do that again, and you're living your life. And if you live in the future of like, I'm planning, I'm navigating, you know, here's the vision that I want, and then you just live in that future, you're constantly living in an anxiety of the expectations of what can and can't happen based on that vision that you have. So I love this, because living in the moment, you know, and this is what I answer when people ask me that, because I live the same way. I prepare for anything. Like I use my intellect. I go, okay, what's going on in this world? And what do I need to do to prepare for that? Right. And then I prepare for it. And then I let go. I let go of the expectations. I let go of the possibilities, the potentials, and I just live in this moment as if the future is open for anything to happen. And so that's my you know, tool that I use, just to be able to not live in that tension.
That's great. That's exactly it. It's like John Lennon said, I think, what's that quote? Something like life is what happens to you while you're busy making plans. Something I'm paraphrasing that, but something to that effect. You know, in the circles of addiction recovery, there's a really fundamental principle, and that is you take action and you leave the results up to God. Right? Because one could say, oh, so you just live in the now, and like what? You never take a shower or go to work or pay your bills or take care of your kid. No, it's just the future actions and decisions are informed by this moment. And when the next moment arrives, the necessary action presents itself, and you do whatever you believe to be in the highest good for all in that moment. But once you've taken the action, the results have nothing to do with you. The world of cause and effect, you know, the world of cause and effect is this happens and it causes that to happen. But in reality, things are actually just unfolding and manifesting of their own volition. It's like causation and evolution are actually one thing. It's like evolution is just manifestation in motion. It's just the universe is just reborn continuously, right?
And that's funny, because that's like,
it's just constantly expanding and growing. Yeah. It's just this perpetual motion of evolution. And so we think that cause and effect and creation is the way that things get done, but creation is a moving target. It's part of evolution. Like evolution is what's fueling creation. It's a perpetual creation that's going on. So all we really have to do is, as you said, is just feel into our heart, feel into our intellect, use some logic, use some emotion, try to have a balanced idea of how we're going to navigate through our lives and do good for ourselves, our family, for society. And if we make plans and we have a vision, I mean, I write down visions that are maybe 10 years away, but I do the vision right now, and then just take whatever step is right now to get closer to that vision or to that goal. I'm not living in that goal or living in, as you said, that either the future will bring either a sense of anxiety about like, something bad is coming, or it will leave me in fantasy of like, oh, my life sucks right now, but when I get that thing, then I'll feel okay. But what if I just feel okay right now and feel okay on every step of the journey up to that thing? And then you get the thing and you're like, nothing's changed, right? Because you already built within yourself the capacity for gratitude, the capacity for unconditional love for all reality. So when your outward reality changes and you got what, quote, you wanted, or what your goal was or your vision was, you're the exact same person that was doing that planning 5 years ago. And that was a person who was extremely grateful for everything that life presented in that moment, when you were in a little apartment and then you want to be in the mansion. If you haven't gotten that dissatisfied mind eradicated, then that dissatisfied mind will follow you through every accomplishment you have in your life. You'll be in that mansion with the yacht and with the perfect partner and the family, whatever your dream is, certain number on your bank account, and you'll still be that dissatisfied person because your mind is perpetually unsatisfied. What if you could just be totally satisfied with what you have right now and just out of curiosity move towards something different and bigger and greater without the attachment.
Curiosity. That's the key right there. Yep.
Yeah, without the attachment to the outcome. And going back to what you said, it's like, do the work, leave the results up to God. And if our work is based on truth and principles and love, and our motivations are coming, from a desire to not just seek what's good for me, but what's best for the highest good for all creation, all people, all things, every aspect of reality. If I'm aligning what I'm doing and what I want with that, then the results will always be good. And the funny thing is about that, like coming out of the mind that I used to reside in of just survival and selfishness, I used to have the perception that the only way to get what I want is to ignore how it's going to affect anyone else. And that if I help people get what they want, then I won't get what I want because there's only so much to go around, this scarcity kind of thinking, right? But the fastest way to get what you want is to ensure that everyone else is getting what they want and what they need. And what they want ultimately is security and love and belonging and connection. So if one's life is based on providing that to other people, well, if you're serving the highest good, it's inclusive of you, right? So if one's praying for an outcome that serves the highest good for all creation, well, guess what? You're part of creation. So you don't need to pray or work for what you want. You can pray and work for what serves the greater good for all. And you're wrapped up in that. And when one begins to live a life in service to that, you just find that even if there are problems that you perceive, or situations in which you perceive to be roadblocks or problems, that either they don't really bother you much and you're able to just kind of wear them loosely and let them go, or the problems just miraculously transform themselves into something different because you're on that path of the highest good, love, the highest good, love, the highest good. And that's also, incidentally, the only way to evolve and overcome through the other side of polarity of duality. It's like we have this perspective, and I do sometimes too, that if we just jailed all of these evildoers that are running the world, all the pedophiles, all the crooks, throw them all in prison, execute them all. The ego wants to kill everyone, right? Mm-hmm. That's like the QAnon thing. They're all going to be in Gitmo, and then we'll live in utopia. No, we won't, because duality will just express itself through another being, right? You get rid of Bill Gates and George Soros and all these creeps, right? Or people that I perceive to be creeps, at least.
I agree.
their role will just be fulfilled by someone or something else, because the level of consciousness of humanity is at a place where that seat at the table needs to be filled. But what if we stop trying to change the world externally and we just go within and we change our own inner relationship with the world? Then the ideas on how I might change things outside are going to be informed by serving the highest good, not by serving my egoic positionality on the way that I think things should be and all these people should be punished, right? It's like over vast swaths of time, if you go back to the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, more primitive versions of humans, we're actually doing better than ever. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, even, and I'm not a proponent of slavery, obviously, but slavery was even a step above barbarism, where you just went into another territory and just slaughtered everyone. Even just captivating those people and forcing them to do labor to build what you want to build was even a part of an evolution, right? And now we've moved outside of that, where as a collective, we're going, that's not okay. And we're eradicating that practice. And there will come a time in our collective evolution where we look back on something like slavery existing anywhere in the world at any time, like how we look back now at just barbarism and the Vikings and just rape and pillage and slaughter of everyone, kind of thing, right? It's like we look on that like, oh, who would do that? But now that's happening in more covert ways, and it's happening technologically in a different way because of the advancement of industry and war games. Like, war games have changed, but still, if you zoom way, way, way out, we are ever so slowly reaching a higher state of consciousness as a species.
I love that.
So if that's happening anyway, then maybe I don't need to go save the world by controlling the way everyone else thinks and behaves. Maybe I can just continue to elevate my consciousness by serving love and by serving the highest good. And as I said earlier, I can help raise the tide, and all of the ships will be lifted, including those evildoers, right? I don't have to have them executed, or, I believe in justice. Obviously, if people perpetuate crimes against humanity, well, something has to be done with them. But perhaps the overall scale of duality over time will have less contrast, right? Maybe the utopia that we see in the future is still a duality, but someone like cutting in front of you to take a parking spot would be like, oh my God, that's as far as the dark duality goes, right? Right. Who knows how many eons our species has to go before we get there, but maybe that would be a major transgression versus, rape or murder or thoughtless crimes or wars, right? So we just inch further and further, millimeter by millimeter towards a higher plane of consciousness. But I don't think in the earth plane there's ever escaping duality, because the planet and the earth and our whole experience is created with such perfection that it gives us such a broad band of options. And I know this in my own life. I used to break into people's houses and steal their shit. I used to steal from anyone and everyone. I lied constantly. I was extremely selfish. I mistreated people in relationships. I did all kinds of things that, I'm not ashamed of them and I'm not proud of them. It's just my level of consciousness was only capable of expressing itself in that way. But I would never think of doing any of the things that I did in the past. It would just never even cross my mind to do something like that. And so I couldn't be at the more elevated level of consciousness than I am now unless there was an option to be much lower before. I had to have the free will to perpetuate harm on other people and onto myself in order to have the experience to move up from there, right? If everything is up here, where do you go? We need duality in order to evolve as an individual soul or individual expression of consciousness. So from that perspective, the world is perfect, just like it is. It's all perfect.
It's all natural, right?
It's all natural. And because we have options. We have options.
Yeah.
Any one of us can walk out of our house and kill someone, literally. In a second, you could make that decision, but you don't. You want to kill someone sometimes. Your ego wants to kill someone, right? That person cuts you off in traffic. The ego's like, kill them. Literally, that's like the kind of feelings we have. And then the higher self goes, well, let's not overreact here. And then maybe you even have the awareness they could be rushing to the hospital because their kid was in an accident. I mean, you just don't know what's motivating other people. And so that judgment and disdain for fellow humans starts to erode over time when one's aligning itself with just staying on the beam, staying on the path of love for all that is, making it an informed decision to elevate one's consciousness with each decision, with each thought.
Wow. Man, so are you saying that I have to have compassion for Anthony Fauci?
Yes. Well, you don't have to do anything, but
yeah.
But see, you take someone like that, they're also an expression of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And
that's what I'm realizing now in the in your speech. Yeah.
They're fulfilling a role with the utmost perfection and precision. That role is only necessary at this stage of duality because that duality exists, and the level of consciousness of all of humanity is still low enough where that's permissible and where that character has a role in the play. But when the play continues to elevate by each of us doing the elevation practices, I guess you could say I've been describing, there could and possibly will be a time where that villain role is no longer necessary. And the villain role is someone who's causing much less harm, right? But there's still duality, but perhaps like the depth of evil, I guess you could say, or the degree to which one is harming large numbers of people could be perhaps much lower. But to just take out that evildoer or to meet that with hate just perpetuates the same level of consciousness in which we find ourselves, which make that role necessary. Does that make sense?
100%.
So, and this is, trust me, man, like I see a picture of that guy and I'm just like, get him. I don't have this all figured out, despite the way I'm perhaps presenting it would lead one to believe. But see, when I see that picture, that's when I, as an individual, have that opportunity to change my perspective. That's not to condone someone or their behavior, but it's to understand why it exists and to perhaps understand the way to eradicate that behavior is not to eradicate that person, but perhaps eradicate the need for that person to exist on that level. And how does that happen? That happens by the elevation of consciousness as a whole. How does that happen? By doing it within myself.
And I love that. And also, recognizing their role in the bigger picture of like how, he exists, he's there. How is this benefiting everything? How is this going to be helping the collective conscious grow? And I'm so glad that you pointed that out, because it kind of goes back into like healing ancestral trauma and letting go of the past, letting go of that, of those things that we've been either directly or indirectly taught through our parents, through society, through culture, or whatever, and really letting go of that so that we can, in this moment, become aware of the spectrum of life and like the duality of life and why it all needs to exist the way it is, so that we can then grow into a lesser evil. It's so weird to say that, because it's like you really have to like breathe into it. You'd be like, oh shit, this is what it is. And the goal is to get less. It's like we can't eradicate the evil. It's always going to be there. The goal is to get that evil a little less destructive. Right?
I mean, that's a wild guess.
I love it. I love it though. I'm on board. Guess. I'm on board with that one.
Because again, just going back, historically speaking, the duality of good and evil has always existed as far as we know, right? The dark, the light, the here, the there, the left, the right, the whole thing. But as I said, if we zoom way, way, way out, the contrast has lessened a bit. I mean, the overall morality of humankind has definitely improved. So one could think that if we're on this trajectory, which is probably not even under our control really as much as it is just the nature of consciousness expressing itself and going higher to higher and higher levels. But one could perhaps fast forward 50,000 years and we'll look back on today's world going, oh my God, what a bunch of barbarians. But there still will presumably be some degree of duality present, because it seems that that's what the earth realm is all about. But I mean, when you do psychedelics, I mean, anyone that's done that, you realize very quickly, oh, there's much more than this earth, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there's especially with something like ayahuasca. I mean, you're opening up portals to a multiverse, dimensionally speaking, and you realize that the perspective that we have of the material world and being in a body is such a small part of what's really going on and everything that's going on. But again, here we are. So we do the human thing. We play the human role, and you do your best to be the hero and not the villain.
There it is. So man, this whole conversation went down a road that I didn't expect. I love it. I love the conversation, but I definitely have like 7 questions here that I didn't get to ask. But so to kind of bring it back to, you know, the conversation of becoming the best version of ourselves and health, and you know, your expertise is looking at how you can make your body, this physical body, better, which then it looks like, in my perspective to what I'm listening to, is that once you were able to do that and get the body at least to a certain point, you then started going, oh, what else is there? Let's go to the metaphysical. Let's go to these other layers that exist. So I guess my question is, because I want to start talking about like a little bit about light and how light affects us, and water, because that's light and water. I've been discussing this with my partner. I would say would be the essential products of this reality that kind of help, you know, on a cellular level, our bodies become the best versions of themselves. So if you can just talk a little bit about light and water, and what is the best water? Like, what is it? The pH? Is it the structured water? Is it Berkey? Is it, you know, what is it? And also light, you know, the spectrum of lights and what we can do to mitigate, you know, the effects of toxic light, you know, for our circadian rhythm and just being able to sleep at night.
Fully. I'll preface it by saying that when one's seeking to elevate their consciousness and to exist in a higher realm, a higher state of being, it's also with that, and it's not like higher is better than lower, right? Because each level of development of the soul has its purpose. So it's not a hierarchical system, a better than system. But if that's what one's goal is, it's not just that each level of consciousness is higher, it is also a higher level of energy. And if your consciousness is experienced and expressed through the body, well, then it stands to reason that the body needs to be able to handle much more energy. It's much more energy. And going back to the ancient practices of yoga and all of the different you know, schools of meditation, et cetera, the point is always kind of readying the body for spiritual energy so that you can actually embody that energy. And so for me, it's not about, having abs, which it's been a long time since I've had those. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at it. Do one vanity Instagram post, look at these abs. But, you know, or even, it's not so much about aesthetics or trying to be perfect. To me, it's an honoring and a respecting of the vessel that creation has given me. And not just the longevity of like how long I want to live, which isn't very important to me. It's how well do I want to live and how do I want to feel? I want to have as much vitality as I can in this body with the sole purpose of doing what I'm here to do as a soul. The trap in that with the biohacking and all of that is that, and this is something I've experienced myself, that's how I know, is it's also easy to get caught in the trap of using the physical practices and all the biohacking and being so body focused that it actually becomes a distraction and a deterrent from doing the real work that you described, ancestral healing, deep trauma healing, shadow work. Like, that's really the stuff, okay? Spiritual growth, you know, building a relationship with a God of your understanding. I mean, that's the real work. But that said, it's also much easier when you have the vitality, because the vitality in your body, you know, quality sleep, and I'll go into the water and light. and all of that makes it much easier to weather the storms of the human experience, right? It's like if I don't get enough sleep, I'm way more irritable. So it's much harder for me to harness the energy to behave, feel, think compassionately toward my fellows when my body lacks energy and vitality. Mm-hmm. So it's not just that I want the energy, it's that I want the energy so I can achieve the goal of actually becoming a better person. So that's always something I like to really help people understand, because man, I mean, I've spent years like finding myself getting too caught up in all the supplements and the technologies and all this. And it's like, maybe I should just sleep better and more and really put focus on meditation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the unsexy stuff that really, I think,
it's the not doing is doing.
Yeah. And just to frame, at least for me, the purpose of taking care of the body again is just to honor it, love on it, to give it what it needs, to understand that, from one perspective, metaphysically speaking, I am not the body, but that's kind of there's an error in that teaching. Like, you are not your mind, you're not your body. Well, that's not all you are, but you also are that, right? Like, the intellect is part of my experience. The mind is part of my experience. The being in a body, the body's real. I'm in it. It's here. We're one. But there's also an auric field or an auric body, an energy body that goes above and beyond this body, that who knows how far it goes out into the ethers, right? So it's an embracing of the whole beingness of one's subjective humanity. And part of that is like, yeah, man, I'm going to take care of my body. So first, light. The universe is essentially made of light. Like, light is prior to matter, like in the wave form, right? And so all living things on the face of the earth live in accordance to the sun, including human beings. And human beings are essentially a walking solar panel. So you have photoreceptors covering your entire body, on your scalp, every part of your body, and most especially your eyes and the optic nerve that carries information from the outer world into your brain. And your eyes are actually part of your brain, which is weird. We think the eyes are some separate organ. No, they're just like a part of the brain that pokes out in these two balls. It's really freaky. So through evolution, we've been yoked to solar cycles. And in the solar cycles, our body responds to the spectrum or color of light present. And so our neurotransmitters, our hormones, our metabolism, all of these things are yoked to light. And any animal in the wild, all plants, all living beings that have photoreceptors, which they all do, are responding to the nature and quality of light, the intensity of light and the spectrum of light, right? So as we've evolved for however long we've evolved, I don't think anyone even knows the number, but up until a couple hundred years ago, we didn't have the ability to light indoor spaces and dwellings other than torches and fire. So that spectrum of light you find in fire is orange and red. And then maybe on a full moon, there might be a little blue light that's illuminating the land. But in terms of the magnitude of intensity, just think about how bright it is during the day and how dark it is on a full moon night. So it's very, very little light. When we thankfully invented electricity and the incandescent light bulb, we were able to cheat nature and extend daytime, which is awesome. I fucking love that. It's great. I don't want to stop living life at 5 p.m. when it gets dark in the winter here in Texas, right? I'm like, no, I got stuff to do. I'm going to turn the lights on, right? So I'm not against light, but what we missed along the way, and we'll learn later on, we'll look back and be like, oh my God, remember when we took solar noon spectrum of light and put that inside all of our houses and buildings and offices and hospitals and schools, and had solar noon light talking to our skin and our eyes and our brain at midnight? That's very confusing to human biology. So some folks have, and I'm not the one that figured this out, right? I started learning from people like Jack Kruse and experts on light, water, magnetism, et cetera. A really easy way to solve that problem, well, there's a couple ways. One is inside your house to just have a set of lighting that's just all red. That's why we're building this house now. And I mean, I spent extra money to have the electricians wire the recessed lighting in the ceiling to be on different switches. So at night I can be like, it's red time.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
so
dope.
When the sun goes down outside, I've habituated myself to take that cue, and the sun also goes down inside. So that infrared light that's present at sunrise and sunset, even though you look up in the sky and you still see some blue, the UV is very low to non-existent at those points in time. So after dark, you really want to create a sunset temperature of light or spectrum of light inside your house. That's not feasible for all people. So years ago, some inventive folks came up with blue blocking glasses, right? And even I think the blue blocking glasses in the beginning, they were just tinted yellow, and you'd use them for hunting and playing golf and stuff to kind of reduce the glare, right? It would create more contrast in your visual field. But then people started realizing, wow, your circadian rhythm, this ability your body has to yoke itself to where you are on the planet at any given time geographically, we can actually cheat that by wearing blue blocking glasses. And so I started, buying all the different brands of blue blocking glasses. And eventually, actually last week, I just launched my own blue blocking glasses. It's called Gilded by Luke Storey. You can find it at gildedbylukestorey.com. Really grateful to have that project. I used to work in fashion for like 17 years. I was a celebrity stylist in Hollywood. So I like cool looking stuff. And I found that the glasses that were like scientifically viable on the market looked really lame to me. That's just my personal style. And there were ones that look cooler, like Tom Ford or Gucci or something. They would make what they call blue blocking glasses, but they don't have the scientific validity to actually block the correct spectrum of blue and green light. So I made my own, Gilded by Luke Storey. So an easy fix for anyone is just when the sun goes down, you put on your blue blocking glasses and you just keep them on until you go to bed. Or if you don't like having something, I don't like having something on my face. Like it's just annoying kind of I don't like wearing glasses typically. I'm supposed to wear prescription glasses and I often don't just because I just don't like the way they feel. But the easier way is obviously just change all the lighting in your house, but that could be money, time intensive, and it could annoy the shit out of the people that you live with that don't care about toxic blue light exposure and melatonin production. So that to me is so fundamental to health. Like everyone's caught up on paleo, vegan, carnivore. I'm like, y'all have fun with that. If you're not dealing with blue light, you are jacking your hormones, your metabolism, and more than anything, your melatonin. When even your skin has been proven to stop melatonin production when exposed to light, because as mammals, we go outside, it's daylight, we start producing cortisol when we're exposed to blue light. And cortisol and melatonin balance each other. Speaking of duality, right? They're like a scale in your body. So when you put on blue blocking glasses after dark, you actually start already to produce melatonin. The minute you take those off and open your refrigerator, even for a few seconds, your body's like, oh, it's noon. Let's make cortisol. And people wonder why they can't fall asleep or stay asleep. So, and there's a whole other thing on melatonin, but melatonin is not just for sleep. It's the body's most potent antioxidant. It's an incredibly powerful endogenous antioxidant. It's got anti-cancer properties. I mean, it does so much more in terms of just regulating our biology and our energy. So that to me is like, that and EMF to me are the number one things. And EMF is a whole other conversation, but there are ways to mitigate that. I like technology. I like living in the modern world. It's fucking awesome. I'm live streaming on Facebook and Instagram. We're on Zoom recording this. I've got a computer, internet. Like I can turn the lights on at night. I'm not trying to be a caveman, but I think am a bit of a fortune teller in that as time passes, we're going to look back on the level of EMF, 3G, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi routers, smart technology in the home, blue light everywhere. We're going to look back on this and be like, oh my God, how are we so stupid? Which is what happened with asbestos, DDT, cigarette smoking, pesticides, Roundup.
Lead paint.
Yeah, lead paint. Exactly. We're going to look back and go, oh man, I wish we would have known. So I'm one of the advocates for like, let's not wait until we're all wrecked by this. Let's just mitigate it, just fix it. So that's the blue light thing. As far as water, I agree with you. Water is the substrate of all matter here, the basis of all life. I mean, between water and minerals and magnetism and light, I mean, that's kind of what makes everything tick. And when you look at the body's composition, on a molecular scale, the body is something like 98% water, molecule for molecule. And then there's some debate on, your body weight, like the mass of your body being, some say 60, 70, 80% water. But essentially what the physical body is a big sack of water. That's really what you are.
Yeah, if I've seen a meme somewhere that if you dehydrate the body completely, it's just like it becomes like this puddle of skin. Because it's the majority is water, like you said.
Yeah, and the same could be said when you cremate a body. I mean, you have a little urn of carbon ash, basically. Where's the rest of the body? It evaporated in the heat of the fire. It was all water.
Yeah.
So as I started to look into that, and also looking into, all of not just the water in our tissues and all of that, like in our organs, but actually the fluids of the body, right? So the blood, saliva, tears, semen, vaginal fluid, embryonic fluid, like every fluid that the body produces and manufactures is made out of the water that you ingest. So after kind of having that understanding, starting to look into what's in water, right? Municipal water, tap water, fluoride, just all the chemicals, the pharmaceutical, the residual pharmaceutical drugs. It's just insane. So then you're left with, okay, so if the water's mostly toxic, I'll just filter the water. You make distilled water or reverse osmosis or RO water. Well, then it gets into the energetics of water. Now you're actually turning real water into more of a pharmaceutical water. It's like H2O, like a sterile,
dead water.
Dead water.
Dead water.
So the life force, the energetics of water. So it won't grow algae, right? If the water doesn't grow algae, that means it's energetically dead. And then there's also the structuring of water through the movement of water. When water, this goes back to the work of Victor Schauberger, when water moves in the natural environment, it moves in spirals. It twists. So we run our water through right angle plumbing systems and pipes all under the ground and into our structures, thus disrupting the natural energetics of water. So, looking at all that, and as you said, you didn't know we were going to talk about consciousness for an hour and a half or whatever. I could riff on water for even longer probably. But looking at kind of, okay, what's wrong, right? Something's wrong. If we want to be optimized, I believe that water and light, of course, is at the fore, and EMF mitigation, but water is really at the core of the physical body. So, what do we do about it then? So my strategy for water for many years has been to go out into nature and harvest my own spring water, ideally from high altitude springs. So let's say you have a little Brita filter in a pitcher that you fill up, and there's about 6 inches of what's probably some sort of charcoal and carbon. And the idea there is that the water passes through and impurities in the water are picked up by the filter medium. And then you end up with what you hope to be pure water. Well, if you go up to a mountain spring that's 8,000 or 10,000 feet above the water, and that water is coming from underneath that mountain, that's how much filtration is taking place versus your little 6-inch Brita. Now, not all springs are created equal, and there is also two schools of thought on what a spring is. To me, a spring would be a spring that's producing primary water. Primary water is water that has actually never been on the surface of the planet before, and it's not being drilled for or mined for. Nature itself, through the pressures underneath the surface of the earth, have determined that that water is now ripe and ready to go feed the surface. And that water, there's springs that have been going throughout all of recorded history and are still going today. And I love going to springs. Like Mount Shasta would be a great example of the headwaters of this. I think it's the Sacramento River. It's like a gushing river just coming out of a hole in a rock. And it just goes and goes and goes and goes, right? So this idea that there's a shortage of water, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that there's a shortage of crude oil. I'm open to alternative sources of energy. But we've been led to believe that there's this lack of abundance, because then it becomes more profitable for the people that control those pieces of real estate around the planet that have access to what's to be found underground. But true spring water is ideally primary water. So this is water that you could test in a laboratory, like this water right here behind me from my friends.
So I was looking at it. I was like, I wonder what kind of water that is.
Oh man, that's a whole other story. I'm talk about manifestation. But you can have this water lab tested. There's no traces of nuclear fallout, radiation from nuclear testing in the 50s, et cetera, and probably in other decades. pesticides, heavy metals, all the naughty things, the bacteria, any of that not present, just pristine, clear water with ideally a very low mineral content, which they call a TDS or total dissolved solids. And people think minerals, they're good for you. Well, the minerals that are carried by rock are typically not very well assimilated because they're inorganic minerals. It's like that chalky calcium you get when you boil some water. Your body doesn't know what to do with that except deposit it in your joints and later call it arthritis. So to me, the rad water is a low mineral water or a low TDS water. So that's like a real spring. The idea, like a mountain that's made of granite is going to have much lower TDS than a hill made of limestone, which is a very porous, easily eroded rock. So the harder the rock, the taller the mountain, typically the more pure your spring will be. Now, if you look at a water like a Mountain Valley spring water in the green bottles, hey, listen, quality problem, first world problem. I'd rather drink tap water than have no water. Okay. I'd rather drink filtered water than, and so on. There's a hierarchy to me of water, and I acknowledge my privilege and hard work that I've done in my life to be able to get good water. But I would not drink willingly Mountain Valley water because, for example, that's actually a well water. It's drilled like you would drill for oil, and it's pumped out of an aquifer. And aquifers are essentially large wells. Again, better than tap water, but not as good as primary Rocky Mountain high altitude spring water. Yeah,
like natural birthing. Like you said, like the earth decided this is matured water. Go ahead.
Totally. Yeah, that's how I look at it. I could be wrong, but that to me, like nature's going, okay, it's ready, and it springs forth. Another interesting thing about spring water is if you look at how many cities, towns, counties have the name springs in them, human beings have always settled where there are springs.
Right.
There's an old spring under downtown Los Angeles. They've since capped it off. But the reason that downtown LA is where it is because of Spring Street, one of the major thoroughfares.
Wow, interesting. I didn't know that.
Downtown LA is called Spring Street because back in the day, that's where everyone came and got this fresh, life-supporting water. So human beings really like springs. And this is also true of the healing waters of hot springs, the sacred waters around the planet that have been revered by human beings, indigenous people for time immemorial, right? We know that there's something about it that draws us to that water. Why are the most expensive pieces of real estate in the world all waterfront? There's something about water.
Something about water. and even in energy too. I grew up in front of the ocean, and I'm actually now in the middle of the desert in Phoenix, but there's an energy to that. Like this power and this energy, for me, it just connects me to my mother, where like my mother would walk into a room and her energy would flood the room. I'm sure it's different for everyone, but there's like this energy. It's a specific type of energy to be around that and be around that noise.
Yeah, it's primordial. So to wrap up the water piece, something that people can do is go to a website called findaspring.com. And it's a user-generated nonprofit directory of springs all around the world, hot and cold springs. And I think it's free. It used to be. My friend Chris, who has this company, Alive Waters, he acquired Find a Spring from another friend of mine named Daniel Vitalis, who's a huge spring water proponent. And so Find a Spring is a great resource. I will say not all springs are totally safe. Like if it's lower altitude, if there's land above it that could be compromised, sometimes there's a diesel gas spill like above where a spring comes out. There could be things like E. coli, et cetera. So I always recommend, like, if you're going to drink from a spring, make sure it's in the middle of goddamn nowhere and there's no land above it, that it's at the top of something. And if there's not, find out what's on top. But more than anything, you can have like your local spring water tested. There are multiple labs you can send it to that will test for pathogens and contaminants. And also, if you go to like a small rural community and there's a spring where all the hippies at the health food store go get their water, if everyone's not keeling over or, running home with diarrhea, the spring's probably safe. But I just like to give that disclaimer. Some spring water is very tainted with all kinds of different chemicals. So it's not like anytime you see water bubbling out of the earth, go drink it. That's not what I'm advocating for. It's in educating oneself about the nature of springs and how to get them tested and if they're safe and where you find them and all that. So that's my thing. But yeah, now for many years in LA, I went up to places in the mountains like Big Bear and places, hours from LA. And I would fill my whole car up with these 5-gallon glass carboys. I almost killed myself once trying to carry them down a mountain in Angeles Forest. I used to go to great lengths to get water. And then my friend Chris started this company, Alive Waters, and he procured a really pristine spring in Oregon. And now he delivers all through California.
Oh,
and
wow,
I've been on that water for years, and he doesn't treat it with any chemicals or anything. If you let this water sit in the sun for like a month, it will grow algae. I mean, it's living water. Awesome. And then when I moved to Texas a few months ago, I was like, Chris, man, there's no springs out here. It was one of the actually things I was really bummed about moving from California. And I've also lived in Colorado where I used to get spring water, and I've always lived near mountains in some way. I was like, bro, you got to find a spring out here. And it took him months and months. And he finally found a legitimate primary water spring in Alabama. And he's now delivering this water to people in Austin.
That is so dope.
Yeah. So I mean, talk about like manifestation. I'm so grateful that it worked out. And so he delivered this a couple days ago. And I've been using filtered water at home. For those that are like, well, I can't get spring water. There is a really great system. It's called the AquaTrue. I link to it on my website. I think there's a pretty substantial discount on there at lukestorey.com. I was using the AquaTrue, and I still will use that when I run out of this water in between deliveries or in an emergency to feed my plants, things like that. The pets get this water, but the AquaTrue is a really great system because it's reverse osmosis, but it's countertop. So it doesn't have the potential to grow mold and get bacteria, not mold so much, but rather bacteria. The under-counter reverse osmosis systems are not ones of which I'm a fan because there's a holding tank that never gets cleaned, and they're usually rife with bacteria. So a lot of people that are immunocompromised or have Lyme, and I'm going to drink filtered water, I'm going to drink RO water, and they're doing that way. I've heard just stories of people having a difficult time getting well because they're unknowingly repopulating their body with pathogens and causing co-infections or perpetuating the co-infections they already have. So not all filtered water is the same, but I've settled on the AquaTrue for a whole house filter, which I'm going to install. I've not settled on one yet. The best one I found is called Ophora water, Ophora. They're out of Santa Barbara, but they're super, super high end and like very expensive, but that's the best whole house thing. So I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that or keep looking around. But that's basically the spiel on water. But if you do, reverse osmosis on your water, you got to remember you're taking out all of the minerals and any life force, and you have an empty water. So I like to use something called Quinton sea minerals. That's Quinton. They're taken from, it's water that's taken from plankton blooms in the ocean, and it has all these bioavailable micronutrients and minerals. And so you can mineralize your water with the Quinton sea minerals, specifically the hypertonic solution, which is tastes like seawater. I mean, it's like salt water because it is, I guess. But that's a great way to kind of breathe life back into it. And then there's the whole energetics of putting red light on your water and crystals and tourmaline and all the things, which is probably too long of a conversation. But that's my water strategy and recommendation. If you can find a clean spring, do that. If you can't, use something like the AquaTrue, filter your water on your countertop, and then remineralize it and look into ways to restructure it. You can use a Somavedic. It's a device you can use to restructure your water by just putting it near it. There are a number of different things you can do to kind of bring back the life force. Because in nature, any water that sits still goes bad. There's a reason why, like when you drink fresh out of a spring, it's cold and you can just feel the life force in it. It sounds crazy, but it really is true. And I know so many people experientially that have shared that. You go drink from a spring at 8,000 feet for the first time. You're like, oh my God.
I want to go run a marathon. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I've never even had water before. Really. Yeah. And most people haven't had like true natural water. So yeah, that's my spiel on that.
I love that. And I love that you ended it that way because that kind of plays into just life in general, where stagnation creates death. Totally. If you're stagnant, that's when you start to die.
Totally.
So don't stagnate yourself. Wow. I have one last question. I know we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes, but last question, just because this, in my podcast, I do conscious or manifest, which where we talked about manifesting, consciousness, which you talked about. Now we've got to talk about crypto. So I just want to know your perspective on crypto. This is what I teach. We talked a lot about abundance and letting go of scarcity and letting go of that divisive capitalism of like, you said it like that somebody needs to lose. Like for me to win in this reality, somebody else, I can't be thinking of other people, right? I can't be compassionate about other people when it comes to money. So what is your perspective on crypto? Like, what do you know about it? And do you have any sort of point of view?
I can preface that by saying I know very little about it, but I have a lot of really bright friends who are super into it. So a couple of years ago, I don't remember how long it was when Bitcoin was like at 7,400, because I remember asking some of my really smart friends, like, is this crypto thing legit? Should I buy Bitcoin? And everyone's like, yes, do it. So I bought one coin for 7,400, I guess. And it's whatever it is today. It's a lot more.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of it, but I don't understand much about it. But I am all for decentralizing currency, because fiat currency is just, it's a falsehood anyway, right? When the Federal Reserve took over and in the scandalous way that they did, and we got off the gold standard, like money doesn't have any intrinsic value, and therefore it's very easy manipulated by the people that control its production, right? Make more money, it's worth more, it's worth less. It's pretty basic to understand. You could teach a kid how the fiat money system works, and it's a huge scam. Mm-hmm. Central banking, all of it, to me is probably the way in which these control freak, people that are here for a reason and we love them unconditionally, but these control freaks have worked through central banking and these cartels that they've created to really control every aspect of human life. That, of course, goes into controlling the ways in which we're educated and how we're taught about money and finance, and the medical system, the pharmaceutical system, food production. Everything kind of revolves around this, the USD and the price of oil per barrel, and all of this whole thing it's set up in a way that's sort of hidden and shadowy and easily controlled by the few, and the effects of their decisions affect the many, sometimes adversely. So I love, even though I don't understand the crypto thing, I do understand that it's less subject to control by fewer people because it's decentralized. That's the whole premise of being decentralized, right? Is that it's everywhere, and there's tons of people doing it and controlling it, and there's not like one overlord, that's head of the international banking cartel that's going to be pulling strings and fluctuating the economy and stuff. So I'm into it. I'm continuing to learn about it. I want to learn more. My friend that dropped off the spring water, Chris, he came over for a couple hours a couple nights ago and to show me how, okay, you're going to get this credit card, and then, just ways to kind of work with it a bit more, which I'm just like, I don't know. When I have a little extra cash, I buy some Ethereum or some Bitcoin and then check my balance. And I'm like, cool, that fake money is still there, but there's more of it, I guess it wouldn't really be meaningful to me really until I took some of it back, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to get taxed on the gains, right?
And that's a whole conversation.
But it's cool. It's a great way to squirrel away money, actually, because I don't want to spend it, and therefore I still have, whatever that initial Bitcoin sitting there and a little bit more, and I'm like, cool. I actually don't want to touch it because I don't know how to touch it without someone taking it from me. But I see it kind of as a way to also offset the incredulous, illegal practice of income tax that we are subject to here. So I kind of look at the gains there and I'm like, we're almost even. You know what I mean? You take my 35% for doing God knows what, unethically and unlawfully, and that's a whole other conversation. So at least like I got to come up over here, and it makes me feel a little better about my standing, in terms of dealing with the international monetary system.
Yeah, and we kind of discussed a little bit in our conversation about slavery and how, we used to be in a conscious level of barbarism where we go into other people's towns and just kill them. And then we moved into actual slavery where you're taking those people and making them work for you and forced to do something. And then, just the progression of it to this point to where the slavery is on a psychological conscious level, where the slavery is you are enslaving yourself through manufactured consent, through the ideological subversion, through all these manipulations in this reality. So in my opinion, crypto is that last piece of the puzzle to truly allow us to take back that power of our reality when it comes to really anything to do with transactions. So like, our reality is limited by these centralized organizations, right? You have the federal government, you have educational system, you have religion. Like they're very centralized to going upwards in a pyramid, to the small few in the top. Crypto is really giving us the power to take back that structure to where the people at the bottom now are working with themselves and not having to go through the top few that control the many. They could just do it with themselves. And so, I always like to bring it up and get that perspective because especially you have such a wide, broad perspective, and it kind of aligns with that.
Yeah. Chop the tip off the pyramid.
Actually, somebody said to me one time, it's not even that. It's not about chopping it off. They did a great experiment or analogy or like a illustrated presentation where they took a pyramid of sugar cubes and they had two bowls. One was empty with the sugar cubes in the pyramid, and the other one had a bowl of water. And she was explaining how, through love and through growth and through our own individual growth and awareness, and then she explained it like, this is us doing that growth. And then she poured the water into the bowl of sugar cubes. And she said, as we grow, we start to absorb the top down.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
So we're changing ourselves, we're changing individually, and it's going to create that wave and perpetuate it upwards. We think sideways, we think waves, like we make a ripple in water and it goes sideways. Well, we're making ripples up towards the people that are up on top. And so, as time moves on and as we grow, as we get, stronger in our consciousness, we'll start to bring that absorb that reality into a new one.
I love it, brother.
This was great. I am so grateful.
Likewise.
Luke, thank you so much. If you want to leave one last piece of advice or plug or anything you want to say.
Yeah, I think the advice would be get yourself some blue blocking glasses at gildedbylukestorey.com, GILDED, gildedbylukestorey.com. Luke Storey's got an EY. And then I would love for people to check out my podcast. It's called The Life Stylist. And I talk about really all of the things we talked about today with the exception of crypto, but consciousness, meditation, mindfulness, psychology, philosophy, and all things biohacking. And those are probably the two things that I'd love to share with people the most.
Maybe we need to do a crypto podcast episode, me and you.
I would consider that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time, brother. Thank you.
Otto.
What an amazing connection with Luke Storey. Quick shout out to Bailey Richardson for making that connection happen. I'm super grateful for you. Yeah, that's what it's all about, guys. It's about taking back that power. That's why I love crypto so much. I love giving this quick analogy of what crypto really is in this reality. I always like to compare it to a jungle. So the crypto space is this massive wild jungle, and anybody can just walk into it. So imagine walking into this jungle and you find all sorts of free things, right? You have fruits, you have vegetables, you have trees, you have animals, you have running water, you have dirt, you have all this stuff, all this life that you can tap into and use as a resource. Now, imagine walking through that jungle and you find a place, a fountain or a spring of water, right? And that spring of water is birthing water out of the ground. And we can go down the science of all that, but when the water is mature enough underground, the pressures of the earth push the water up. It gets filtered through all those layers of bedrock, and then it comes out clean and beautiful and ready to be consumed. So I like to compare that abundance to crypto. You can be walking in the jungle, find that water, start drinking it, tell your friends, come back later, get some more. It's abundant. You've now unlocked the codes of abundance for that specific, spring of water. The same thing is happening in the crypto space. You have this massive, crypto digital jungle that exists now, and we all have the opportunity to walk into it, into the internet, the Web 3.0 internet space, and unlock the abundance and find those fountains, find those springs that are giving so much life. So make sure you guys really try to dive deep into this space. If you want to learn more, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I have a free 90-minute course that goes deep into this conversation. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to get into the university level status, I have a 7.5-hour paid course that gets you there as quickly as possible. So make sure you guys check out my free 90-minute course. It's on my website, otogomes.live. It's 90 minutes, free, guys, free. And if you become a part of my community, I have a lot of things that I'm working towards in the year 2022. So with that said, always make sure to gamify your abundance. Love you guys. Peace.